Has Shinto ever been identified with any political regimes?
What came to be known in 1945 as state, Koka, Shinto began as a formal development after the Meiji Restoration in 1868. The term state Shinto was coined in the Shinto Directive of 1945 to distinguish formal Japanese government involvement in religious affairs from the religious concerns of Japanese generally, which were called sect, shuha, Shinto. After 1868, the Japanese government imposed a system of devotion to the emperor as a kind of state creed. Most Christians and Buddhists, as well as adherents of other traditions, considered themselves part of that system. Shrine Shinto was another term used to refer to the system. Since the government had instituted in 1868 an elaborate structure of ranks for administering the nation's shrines, government directives regulated everything in shrine life, including specific rituals to be performed and how records were to be kept. Underlying all this was the principle of worship-government unity, Saiseiichi. Directives also set up an elaborate hierarchy of the Shinto priesthood. One of the principal results of this extensive government control was the doctrine of absolute loyalty to the emperor and the expression of that loyalty in religious practice. A major symbol of the new way was the founding in 1869 of Tokyo's Yasukuni Shrine as a memorial to all war dead. As a way of controlling powerful symbolic expressions long connected with Shinto, the government decreed in 1884 that the torii gate could be used only for state shrines. In 1900, the government further ordered that shrine Shinto was no longer to be considered a religion as such, but a universally binding attitude of reverence for the emperor, complete with appropriate rituals. Another aspect of Shinto's relationship to the Japanese government is that long before the Meiji era, imperial palaces in the various capitals had maintained a system of 3 shrines within the compounds for exclusive use by the royal family. In the center, the Kashikodakuro enshrine the symbols of the emperor's divinity. The Koraiden, on the left, was dedicated to spirits of past emperors and their wives. And to the right the Shinden enshrined all the kami of heaven and earth. These shrines remain integral to imperial ritual today. State Shinto consisted of the approximately 100,000 shrines held under central control between 1868 and 1945, and the Shinto rites unique to the imperial household. Japan's post-war constitution guarantees freedom of religion and mandates strict separation of state and religious affairs.
What are some of the main varieties of Shinto officials or specialists?
Shinto tradition refers to the priesthood in general as either Shinshoku or Kanishi. Larger shrines with full priestly staffs distinguish among a number of ranks. The chief priest is called the Guji, generally the highest-ranking local official. Guji might have oversight of up to 30 subordinate shrines. The Gonguji is second in command and oversees a staff of several lower ranks as well, including junior assistant chief priests, Shingonguji. Senior priests are called Neki, assistant senior priests Gonneki, and regular priests Shutten or Kyujo, fill out the ranks of male staff. A national ranking system also distinguishes among priests by acknowledging their levels of learning with the equivalent of academic degrees, named purity, Jokai, brightness, Maikai, righteousness, Sekai, and uprightness, Chakai. Young unmarried women, called shrine maidens, Maiko, function rather like deaconesses. Dressed in striking vermilion skirts and white blouses, they assist in blessing rituals, run the shrine shop, and perform sacred dance. Maiko traditionally begin their association with the shrine and training for service as sacred children. Highest in rank is the unique position called Saishu, found only at the ISE shrine and held by a woman. She is an imperial princess with the symbolic title Master of the Matsuri, festivals. Assisting her is a priest with the rank of Daiguji, Great Chief Priest, a function unique to ISE. In the imperial household, ritual specialists have either of two ranks. The Shoten parallels the shrine rank of senior priest. The Shoten that of assistant senior priest. But the emperor himself or a personal delegate presides. Much as the Chinese sovereign once did, at over 24 annual ceremonies.
How are Shinto leaders chosen and given authority?
Shinto priesthood has historically been a hereditary occupation. Even after the government officially took over the appointment of chief priests after 1868. Hereditary succession continued in many localities. Perhaps the most important ingredients in maintaining standards among Shinto officials are the two educational institutions now solely responsible for the training of priests. Tokyo's Kokyugakuen, National Learning University is a relatively recent development. A private university that offers general education as well as the equivalent of Shinto seminary curriculum. It supplies research for the present centralized shrine authority, the Jinjiya Honcho. The Kagaken, Imperial Hall of Learning, University near ISE was originally a public institution that closed after World War II and then reopened in 1952 as a private university. Priests to be study Japanese history and literature, but focus on Shinto studies, especially ritual and theology. Shinto priests are not ordained clergy, strictly speaking. They are laypersons granted certification or licensure upon satisfactory completion of the seminary curriculum and its qualifying exams.
Did Shinto tradition spread beyond Japan?
Shinto has gone as far as Japanese emigration and military expansion have carried that ancient tradition. You'll see the occasional Shinto shrine in various parts of the Pacific Basin even now. Reminders of a time when Japan projected its imperial presence beyond its shores. Where Japanese communities have taken root and continue to grow, especially during the last 50 years or so. Older people especially take comfort in celebrating at the nearest shrine for festivals. But on the whole, Shinto has remained about as purely Japanese a phenomenon as one can imagine. Even in parts of the United States, for example, where now sizable communities of Japanese descent make their homes. Traditional Shinto priests are exceedingly rare. Some suggest that Shinto anywhere but in Japan is a contradiction in terms. Shinto remains, ideally, a tradition inseparable from the very soil of Japan and its sacred streams, groves, and mountains.
Is it appropriate to call Shinto a religious tradition?
Religious studies scholars have increasingly come to appreciate the genuinely religious qualities of Shinto. Every now and then criticism still surfaces that Shinto is so much a part of ordinary Japanese life that it is really a set of cultural beliefs and practices rather than a religious tradition. Some critics base their conclusion on polls of the Japanese public that seem to suggest widespread apathy about religious issues. Decreasing numbers of people are willing to identify themselves as adherents of any religious tradition, including Shinto. Other critics note that even Japanese who do consider themselves active participants in a Shinto-based community are likely to claim that they are Buddhist as well.
Is ritual sacrifice part of Shinto tradition?
According to Shinto tradition, the kami neither require nor ask for sacrificial offerings. Sacrifices in many traditions imply the need to assuage guilt or undo an evil action. Shinto tradition focuses on impurities that one can overcome merely by sincere purification. Some rituals in Shinto history have included animal sacrifice. Perhaps under the influence of imported Chinese practices. But that did not become a regular feature of Shinto worship.
Are there any organizations or institutions that have their own distinctive structures of leadership within Shinto?
An important organization in Shinto is the Shrine Guild, Miyazie, composed of village elders who share responsibility for their local clan or parish shrine. Each man agrees to oversee shrine affairs for a full year. Other organizations called kosa have occasionally sought to raise funds to send members on pilgrimage or to galvanize public support for a particular project such as shrine renovation. Some of those groups eventually grew into the various Shinto sects of modern times. Various groups known as Sodeikai, Ujikokai, and Ujiko Sodei, loose. Synonyms for associations of parishioners/worshippers. Have sprung up all over Japan for the purpose of gathering donations and sponsoring festivals. Unlike some other traditions, Shinto is not famous for developing major internal organizations such as religious or monastic orders that may connect to the fact that the Shinto priesthood itself is historically associated with heredity and clan and has never been an ordained clergy as such. There are, however, exceptions, such as the monastic order that grew out of a sectarian lineage called Yutetsu Shinto.
What rites do Shinto practitioners perform in their shrines?
When worshippers go to their local or larger regional shrines, they may engage in several types of ritual called worship gestures, omeri, depending on the occasion. A simple list of 4 P's sums up the essential ingredients of Shinto ritual: purification, presentation of offerings, petition or prayers for blessing, and participation of the assembled worshippers. For ordinary, everyday prayers, in which they express a whole range of needs and concerns. Worshippers typically perform a simple offering before the sacred presence. Alone or in small groups, they enter the shrine precinct and proceed along the path, passing beneath perhaps several torii gates, to the purification font. There they take some water to cleanse the mouth and hands as necessary preparation. A ritual action called misaji, for approaching the holy place. Moving to the front of the shrine, worshippers announce their arrival by ringing a bell that hangs over the threshold of many shrines. Ringing the bell may be either for quieting the mind or summoning the kami, with or without the bell. All toss a coin in the offering box, then bow and clap their hands twice to summon the deity. After making a brief prayer, they bow twice, one deep and one slight bow, and then depart. For special occasions, individuals or small groups can arrange for the services of the priestly staff. Rites that last from 10 to 15 minutes take place inside the front worship hall, Hayden. Various spiritual purposes of the rituals include divine blessing and protection, the opportunity to communicate with the kami about countless daily happenings and concerns, and expressions of personal dedication to the divine beings. These services are available most days in shrines with larger staffs. For the tradition has set aside no one day of the week as a canonical day of worship. In larger shrines, the priestly staff also make daily morning and evening offerings to the kami, in addition to the various daily rites. Shrines host numerous events throughout the year for special occasions, as described above, matsuri.
What is a kamikaze?
Divine storm blast roughly translates the term kamikaze that so Many World War II films brought into relatively common English usage. Japanese began to use the term during the Middle Ages in reference to how the gods fended off the Mongol invaders led by Kublai Khan in 1280, a descendant of Genghis Khan. During World War II, the Japanese Air Force resorted to a desperate tactic when the tide began to turn against Japan. Pilots willing to commit suicide for their nation's honor aimed their explosive-laden dive bombers at enemy warships and went down with them. Ever since then, popular usage has referred to any self-immolating tactic or maneuver born of desperation as a kamikaze mission. However, to identify Shinto narrowly with war or with desperate acts such as those associated with kamikaze pilots is to miss out entirely on an overwhelmingly peaceful and beautiful tradition at whose core is the celebration of life and the sacred riches of creation.
What are the basic features of the more elaborate shrine rituals?
Larger rituals typically include 4 features. Before beginning any sacred act, including the simplest ones, celebrants purify themselves with water or salt. Welcoming the kami, kami mukai, is among the first acts of the presiding priest. The invocation is necessary because many matsuri begin away from the shrine in places where the kami does not ordinarily reside. Next is the offering to the kami, and that includes ancestors, as in Chinese traditions. In addition to responding to the obvious requirement of funds to maintain the thousands of shrines great and small all over the country, people make symbolic offerings and the priests in turn formally present them to the deities. Flowers, food and drink, beautiful textiles or jewelry, and even the performance of traditional art forms or sport can be included among offerings. Entertainment arranged in connection with a religious festival is known as divine amusement, gonnijiwai. When the priestly staff perform elaborate offerings, the chief priest opens the doors of the innermost sanctuary. The priests pass the offerings among themselves and finally the assistant chief priest places the offerings before the sanctuary doors. Ritual specialists then recite prayers, many of ancient origin and some more recently composed of praise, thanksgiving, historical recollection about the meaning of the particular occasion. All concluded with appropriately humble leave-taking of the kami with a gesture called sending the kami away, kami-okuri. Ceremonies conclude with a kind of communion rite in which the chief priest serves the other members of the ritual staff a symbolic sip of sake. The priests walk in procession from the inner worship hall to the outer hall for this rite, which is usually brief, depending on the number of officiants participating. When large crowds are in attendance for a particularly festive occasion, the closing meal can be quite elaborate, and include a share in some of the food just offered to the kami. One ritual element notably lacking in Shinto worship is preaching. since worship is entirely focused on relating ritually to the deities. Shinto tradition does not regard persuasive religious rhetoric a necessary tool.
Do Shinto practitioners revere any persons as especially gifted with wisdom?
Japanese tradition generally has held teachers in high regard. But, in the words of one famous Japanese scholar, Shinto is caught rather than taught. As a result, sages, scholars, and teachers do not occupy the place of honor in Shinto tradition to which, for example, Confucianism has elevated them. Human beings are made to worship the divine in all things and to respond in gratitude for countless gifts. Thanksgiving is the wisdom of Shinto. One can encourage it, but most of all it is a gift in itself. Shinto tradition emphasizes first-hand experience of the world and of one's place in it.
Where and how do human beings have access to those truths?
Preeminently through the marvels of nature, including the human. Shinto's deities do not reveal a message otherwise inaccessible to mortals. As is the case in the Abrahamic faiths, for example. They do, however, disclose to anyone who reflects on his or her life with a clear mind and heart all the truth human beings need.
Is there a regular, standard Shinto group liturgical worship?
Communal worship is not a regular feature of Shinto liturgical practice. People may arrive at a shrine in large numbers, but they generally do not gather to worship as a large congregation. Individual and small group worship is the norm, whether for brief impromptu visits made outside the shrine or for more elaborate priestly rituals in the worship hall. A distinctive feature of Shinto architecture is the absence of worship spaces large enough to accommodate sizable congregations. By contrast, the bigger Japanese Buddhist temples accommodate sizable groups in a single worship space. Even in larger Shinto shrines, the parts of the worship facility open to the public are in any case not fully enclosed. Being very much at the mercy of cold weather is the price of wanting a sacred space to be as much in tune with nature as possible. This also reflects the underlying sense that people build community through other activities, but perform their most intimate spiritual duties as individuals or families.
What is the imperial oath in Japan?
The following oath is taken from the 1889 Constitution of the Empire of Japan. It was spoken by the Emperor in the sanctuary of the Imperial Palace, we, the successor to the prosperous throne of our predecessors, do humbly and solemnly swear to the imperial founder of our house, and to our other imperial ancestors that, in pursuance of a great policy coextensive with the heavens and with the earth, we shall maintain and secure from decline the ancient form of government. In consideration of the progressive tendency of the course of human affairs and in parallel with the advance of civilization, we deem it expedient, in order to give clearness and distinctness to the instructions bequeathed by the imperial founder of our house and by our other imperial ancestors, to establish fundamental laws formulated into express provisions of law, so that, on the one hand, our imperial posterity may possess an express guide for the course they are to follow, and that, on the other, our subjects shall thereby be enabled to enjoy a wider range of action in giving us their support, and that the observance of our laws shall continue to the remotest ages of time. We will thereby give greater firmness to the stability of our country, and promote the welfare of all the people within the boundaries of our dominions. And we now establish the imperial house law and the constitution. These laws come to only an exposition of grand precepts for the conduct of the government, bequeathed by the imperial founder of our house and by our other imperial ancestors, that we have been so fortunate in our reign, in keeping with the tendency of the times, as to accomplish this work. We owe to the glorious spirits of the imperial founder of our house and of our other imperial ancestors. We now reverently make our prayer to them and to our illustrious father, and implore the help of their sacred spirits, and make to them solemn oath never at this time nor in the future to fail to be an example to our subjects in the observance of the laws hereby established. May the heavenly spirits witness this our solemn oath.
Is the term revelation useful in understanding Shinto tradition?
All religious traditions are oriented in varying degrees to two great inseparable realities: truth and power. Some, such as the Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, tend to tilt slightly toward truths that human beings cannot discern without direct help from the source of truth itself. Others, such as Taoism, focus more on teaching believers how to discern and benefit from the well springs of power. Shinto is far more concerned with power than with truth. This is obviously an oversimplification. But what it means is that the power of the divine and its implications are the only important truths.
Shouldn't a religious tradition be more invested in turning people's attention to a world beyond this one?
In fact, these and other distinctive aspects of Shinto are among its strengths and the basis for its unique contributions to our world. Shinto offers arresting insights into the inherent divine quality of the simplest things, of the beauty hidden away in life's nooks and crannies. Shinto tradition discerns innumerable causes for profound gratitude to the powers beyond the merely human that make life itself possible. Shinto may not be celebrated for producing sophisticated schools of theological speculation, but it undoubtedly possesses many characteristics that identify it as a religious tradition.
Is exorcism important in Shinto practice?
Demons and assorted evil influences miss no opportunity to make nuisances of themselves, especially at times when human beings and natural processes are most vulnerable. Beginnings, such as planting time or the birth of an infant, can be particularly difficult in this respect. Shinto tradition includes various understandings of how evil forces work and several methods for contending with them. Most undesirable forces are associated with impurity and pollution. Some evil spirits will depart in a ritual that designates as a scapegoat any animal or object capable of taking on the negative forces. Emperors of old rubbed a human effigy over their bodies, leaving all personal impurity on the image, which officials of the Bureau of Yin and Yang then ritually consigned to a river. Other rituals use a weapon such as a sword to attack the evil power as though it were a physical presence. Some rituals assume the evil forces have taken on demonic bodies and must be pursued and expelled from a locality. In one rite, people throw soybeans in unlucky directions and command the demons to depart. An important part of the spring Setsubun, season change. Matsuri. Some large festivals are entirely dedicated to a type of communal exorcism. An originally Buddhist rite called Goryoi, meeting with august spirits, has been associated with Kyoto's famous Jun Matsuri, for example. That festival arose out of a need to banish the spirits of disease, and eventually grew into a full-scale Shinto celebration. Another important interpretation of spirit possession has been traditionally associated with the belief that the fox is capable of changing shapes. Extraordinary spiritual states were therefore sometimes explained as a type of fox possession. Some popular traditions identify various psychosomatic illnesses as forms of possession. Soul pacification, tamashizume, is a kind of reverse exorcism in which ritualists seek to make a spirit content to remain in the body of a person suffering from illness.
How does the hierarchy among Shinto shrines work?
Over the centuries, Shinto authorities have devised a number of structures and classifications by which to distinguish various levels and functions of shrines. The most important is called the shrine rank system, Sheikakusaido. That has been in place since shortly after the Meiji Restoration of 1868. Jingu designates shrines of top rank under imperial auspices, such as Meiji Jingu, in Tokyo, which enshrines royal ancestors, and Ise Jingu, which is at the top of the hierarchy and is called the Daijingu, Grand Imperial Shrine. Next in rank are the approximately 100,000 Jinjia. A generic term including virtually all shrines larger than little wayside structures. About 250 are included on a special list of highest-ranking ones. Of these, some 200 were designated prior to World War II as governmental shrines, Kancha. Many larger Jinjia have spawned affiliated or branched shrines called Buncha. Multiple shrines dedicated to a single kami generally constitute distinct families, with one shrine usually acknowledged as the original foundation from which branched shrines developed. Some very important Jinjia, such as Kajiga in Nara and about a dozen others, have the honorific title Taisha, Grand Shrine, roughly equivalent to Cathedral Basilica. They are also part of a cluster of 22, Niju and Isha, institutions elevated to special status. But even they are divided into 3 levels, 7 high, 7 middle ranking, and 8 lower. That grouping arose out of the practice of ranking shrines within a given region according to their order of priority on pilgrimage routes, or to guide devotees intent on visiting a sequence of holy places. In various prefectures, a further ranking of area shrines simply lists them as first, second, or third shrine, acknowledging the 3 regional shrines that draw the largest crowds of worshippers. A number of Jinjia, some count 138, have been specially designated as nation-protecting shrines. Gokoku Jinjia, because of their dedication to the souls of those who died in battle. 27 shrines within that category, also called deceased spirit-invoking shrines, Shokansha, have been accorded a special rank because of the importance of the heroes from all periods of Japanese history that they commemorate. Tokyo's Yasukuni Jinjia ranks at the top of that category. Before 1945, countless smaller local memorials represented the bottom of this hierarchical category. The main central administration is called the Association of Shinto Shrines. Jinjia Honcho, which has branches, called Jinjia-cho, in each Japanese prefecture.
Are there cyclical Shinto observances, such as feasts that happen regularly but not annually?
Some gatherings still take place on set days in certain odd-numbered months, but not monthly. For example, a practice called waiting for the sun, himachi, finds people gathered private residences on the 15th day of the 1st, 5th, and 9th lunar months to keep vigil until dawn. A Shinto priest is often among the celebrants during the same months, but on the odd-numbered nights of the 3rd week. People come together in groups awaiting the moon, Tsukamaka. September's full moon is especially beautiful, for it falls in the 9th month and is known as the harvest moon. Participants celebrate the lunar beauty with special songs and food. These gatherings occur only in homes. Some people still make special arrangements to observe their unlucky year age. 42 for men and 33 for women with rites at a shrine to ward off misfortune. They may take precautions by means of extra rituals of purification on that day. Some regard certain days each month as fortuitous connection days because they associate them with particular kami, and such days often occasion shrine visitation.
How important was the School of National Learning?
National learning, or kokyugaku, had perhaps more to do with the modern understanding of Shinto than has any other movement within the tradition. Katen no Azumamaro, 1669–1736, is generally considered the founder of the school, insisting on the need to return to the earliest genuinely and purely Japanese sources. Among those he included the Kyojiki, but emphasized the Kojiki and Nihongi especially. Kumo no Mabuchi, 1697–1769. Continued what Kata had begun by applying philological methods to classical Japanese prayer and poetry. He considered spontaneity the native Japanese gift, without which nothing could be truly Japanese. Motori Norinaga, 1730–1801, continued the scholarly dynasty, and is still regarded by some as Shinto's best theological mind. His 44-volume commentary on the Kojiki remains a monument of scholarship. Hirata Itsutane, 1763–1843, was the latest and perhaps most influential exponent of the school, in that he implemented the thought of his predecessor Motori. Together these four men were largely responsible for the articulation of modern Shinto's highly nationalistic and ethnocentric tone.
What kinds of special ritual objects figure in Shinto worship and prayer?
Shinto tradition refers to all of its ritual furniture and utensils with the term saikigo. It includes several items used on every altar during offering ceremonies. The priest carries the offerings, hihaku, and gifts of food, shinzen, on a tray, sambo, which he sets upon an 8-legged table, hasekuin, made of a special reddish cypress wood, hinoki, fire tree. Priestly staff remove these objects after worship ends. Objects used regularly in nearly all rituals include several items that ritual specialists wave over those to whom they are ministering. Branches of the sakeke, combining characters for tree and kami, provide a splash of greenery and association with living nature. A wand used for purification, either in place of or in conjunction with the sakeke branch, is called harigushi, a thick cluster of white paper streamers attached to a long stick. Another stick with a set of zigzag cut white, and sometimes of other colors. Paper symbolizes the kami's presence in the holy place. All three objects are mounted on stands and displayed when not in use by one of the priests or a maiko. Maiko also use a set of 5 bells, suzu, for their sacred dances. Several larger implements play a central role in the great public festivals called matsuri. Most important is the portable shrine called the mikoshi. Celebrants carry this miniature, but still often very heavy, four-sided model of a shrine sanctuary in procession, shouldering long beams that hold the shrine aloft. Larger mikoshi can weigh up to several tons and require a large crew of strong bearers. In some places large wagons called yatai and dashi rumble through the streets on massive wheels, carrying groups of musicians and revelers. Built like mobile shrines. The hefty wooden wagons range in height from just over 30 feet to about 65 feet.
Do Shinto practitioners run private schools for their children?
Private schools equivalent to parochial educational systems in some other traditions have not been institutionally significant in the history of Shinto. Perhaps the closest thing to structured education in Shinto beliefs and values have been occasional government attempts to insert components of Shinto-i.e. traditional or national Japanese ethics into school curricula. In 1937, for example, the Ministry of Education incorporated themes from an 1890 imperial document on education into a new ethics curriculum called Principles of the National Entity, Kokyutai no Hongi, meant to implement the concept of state Shinto. The document emphasizes the historicity of the classic mythical narratives concerning the emperor's divine descent. It praises unquestioning dedication to the corporate good of the Japanese people under the virtuous rule of the emperor. These pre-war governmental actions, however, are entirely different from the grassroots impulses that gave rise to private religious schools in traditions such as Islam and Christianity. There is really no Shinto parallel. In fact, the Meiji and subsequent regimes attempt to teach ethics from on high, so to speak, explicitly forbade religious education on the local or shrine level. Since World War II, however, numerous shrines throughout Japan have developed programs for children and young people, including nursery schools and kindergartens. But these are exclusively social and cultural, rather than religiously educational, developments.
Has martyrdom ever been important in Shinto history?
Shinto tradition reveres many religious heroes who died defending their emperor and homeland. They are martyrs in the broadest sense of the term. They died not for a religious creed narrowly defined, but out of allegiance to the larger complex of beliefs that has been integral to Japanese history and culture. People like the cultural icon Sugawara Michizane, who is said to have perished as a result of his convictions, take their place alongside the royal heroes, the princes who died in defense of the imperial house. Shrines designated as nation-protecting shrines are dedicated to the memory of war dead. They enshrine as kami the souls of all who gave their lives out of conviction. Yasukuni Jinja in Tokyo is a fine example of such a martyr memorial.
What are some of the other days Shinto practitioners celebrate?
Obon Matsuri is one of those feasts whose timing is determined by adding a solar month to the lunar reckoning. Hence a feast formerly celebrated during the middle, i.e., full moon, of the 7th month now occurs during the middle of August, the 8th. On November 23 and 24 falls the New Food Festival, Nii name Sai. Acting as high priest, the emperor himself leads the ceremonies. When a newly enthroned emperor presides, the feast is called Great Food Festival. Daija Sai, and the ritual seals and formalizes the new ruler's accession. This is one of some 30 regular imperial ceremonies. Koshitsu Saishi, that occur through the year, most conducted privately within the palace. The autumnal equinox still calls for quite elaborate observances in some places. Suwa Shrine in Nagasaki, for example, holds its annual Okankai for 3 full rousing days and nights, involving a full range of activities, from raucous processions to solemn pre-dawn purifications conducted in almost total silence. The festival engages large numbers of worshippers actively. Festivities begin and end with more private rituals designed to bring the kami into the ceremony and see them back to their places of repose. Some ceremonies occur often but on a more ad hoc basis than the regularly scheduled festivals. Nearly every new architectural venture occasions special religiously inspired observances. Earth sanctification, Jichinsai, is a ritual of deist origin conducted by a Shinto priest to prepare the ground for new construction. Participants call on the kami of the place for protection. These ceremonies are roughly analogous to the American practice of hoisting a small evergreen to the top of a newly completed structure, perhaps religious in origin, but now purely customary. A rite called sentasei or sengu can occur on any number of occasions. In the ritual, a kami is relocated, either permanently to a new shrine or temporarily, such as during repairs, or for a matsuri, or for a time of repose in one of several of the deity's regular abodes. In the case of Ise Shrine, for example, the ceremony happens every 20 years. When a new shrine is constructed on the grounds,
Is there a Shinto creed?
Shinto beliefs, like those of Daoism and the Chinese community traditions, have never been reduced to a concise formal summary statement. If one were to produce a brief Shinto creedal affirmation, it might go something like this. I believe that sacredness surrounds me, that it pervades all things including my very self, and that the all-suffusing divine presence is ultimately benevolent and meant to assure well-being and happiness for all who acknowledge it and strive to live in harmony with it. Shortly after the Meiji Restoration in 1868, the imperial authorities formulated the rough equivalent of a brief creedal statement, called the Three Great Teachings, in an attempt to enhance the emperor's status. The three teachings included patriotism and respect for the kami, the establishment of heavenly principles in relation to human culture, and dedication to the emperor and his pronouncements. Authorities interpreted the creed in the context of worship of the sun goddess Amaterasu, and the other chief deities in the creation myth. Although it approximated a creed in some ways, this statement was more like an acknowledgement of the importance of underlying religious conviction for the good order of Japanese society.
What effect did the Japanese loss of World War II have on Shinto?
After the Emperor Meiji restored imperial power when the last of the great shoguns asked to be relieved of the burden of authority, loyalty to the emperor became a central theme. Prior to 1945, the vast majority of Japanese regarded the emperor, Hirohito, as infallible. Dedication to the imperial person and rule was perhaps the most important element in national unity. Admission of defeat in 1945 naturally struck at the heart of this central cultural institution. Since most people associated the emperor's divine descent with ancient Shinto tradition, the disastrous defeat called into question the viability of Shinto as a way of understanding the world and the place of the Japanese people within it. On December 15, 1945, the Supreme Commander of Allied Powers, General Douglas MacArthur, issued the Shinto Directive, dramatically altering the shape of Japan's indigenous religious tradition. Acknowledging the tremendous symbolic connection between Shinto and Japanese nationalism, the decree disestablished all shrines and declared them private institutions. Priests were no longer officials of the government. The directive replaced three earlier national structures: the National Association of Shrine Priests, Research Institute for Japanese Classics, and Supporters of the Grand Shrine, of ISE, with the Association of Shinto Shrines. It attempted to bring as many shrines as possible into a voluntary organization, whose purpose was to redefine Shinto as non-nationalistic religious tradition. Most shrines agreed to join, and most remain under local administration, entirely responsible for their own fundraising and upkeep. Long-standing tradition, however, does not yield so easily to the decrees of conquering foreigners. A number of major shrines, such as Yasukuni in Tokyo and others dedicated to Japan's war dead, still have the power to stir nationalist sentiment. Even now, politicians who want to play that card occasionally make highly publicized visits to Yasukuni.
What does Shinto home worship entail?
Religiously committed Japanese families still maintain regular daily home rituals centered around the Kamidana. And perhaps also around the Butsudan or miniature Buddhist temple. Home shrines are dedicated and put into service when family members invite a priest over to install a talisman from the local shrine on which is written the name of the kami to be honored in the home. Worshippers perform a brief purification ritual and then do before the miniature shrine much the same thing they would do at an actual shrine. These rituals, often observed morning and evening, are generally very brief, lasting perhaps 3 to 5 minutes. Some families still ritually incorporate in the evening meal food offered to the kami.
Have the Japanese ever worshipped the emperor? And is the emperor still a religiously important figure?
In early modern times, especially since the Meiji Restoration of 1868, Japanese governmental policy included the veneration of the divine emperor as a central element. Major institutions enshrine 20 of the total number of 124 emperors, as well as 11 princes, and focus on their worship. 7 of the imperial shrines are dedicated to honoring the spirits of rulers who died unfortunate deaths. Since the end of World War II, the role of Japan's imperial family has undergone dramatic changes from its former centrality to culture and religion. People still revere the emperor and his household as noble people, who continue to represent and uphold ancient Japanese tradition. Many venerable and arcane Shinto rituals still occur only behind the walls of the imperial palace. But fewer and fewer Japanese have much interest in those ceremonies. And the emperor no longer has the national priestly status he once enjoyed. Still, many hope a royal son will continue the imperial line long into the future. And some even dream nostalgically of an eventual return to the days when the emperor wielded considerable political power. On the whole, though, it is safe to say that most Japanese no longer regard the emperor as divine and do not think of him or his family as significant religious symbols.
Have women exercised leadership among Shinto practitioners?
In ancient times, women played an indispensable role as shamans in countless Shinto shrines. Even after imperial decrees reduced women's roles in shrine life, giving precedence to a male priesthood, women continued to fill some key positions. Well into the 16th century, for example, women functioned as priestesses in some shrines. The last of the priestesses was a young woman serving the Suwa shrine in Nagasaki. Women have long acted as spirit mediums consulted by many a priest over the centuries, as well as by individual worshippers. Restrictive legislation arising from the Meiji Restoration in 1868 dramatically curtailed women's official participation in shrine staff ministries. Only at the Ise Grand Shrine, sacred to the sun goddess Amaterasu. Does a woman currently hold the position of high priestess? During the Second World War, many women took over priestly functions when their husbands departed for military service.
Was Shinto associated with the samurai code?
Japan's fabled tradition of samurai warriors did have important connections with Shinto. But it did not arise out of Shinto alone or even primarily. Some credit a 17th-century Japanese Confucian scholar and military theorist named Yamaga Soko (1622–1685) as the originator of the Way of the Warrior, Bushido. Yamaga emphasized the importance of sincerity and utter devotion to the ancestral kami as a sure road to experiencing the divine presence. Along with other thinkers of his time, he focused on the concept of Amaterasu as the ancestral kami of the imperial family. Total devotion to the ancestral kami therefore implied perfect allegiance to the person of the emperor, the shogun, and the territorial feudal lords called daimyo. Feudal society depended on the loyalty of its samurai, the knightly or military class. Even after the shogunate and the feudal system gave way to a rejuvenated imperial government under the Meiji Restoration, military supporters of the emperor turned the code of unquestioning dedication to good effect by underscoring the necessity of unstinting affection for the royal person and his household.
Do Shinto practitioners celebrate sacred birthdays or honor particular figures?
Many shrines hold special festivities in connection with dates important in the lives of enshrined kami who were historical figures prior to their deification. For example, the Akamajingu enshrines the child emperor Antoku 1178–85, who reigned for the final 5 years of his very brief life. From April 23 to 25, celebrants recall his untimely death and the reign of his predecessor, Emperor Gotaba. Tenjin Matsuri, from July 24 to 25, celebrates the deified scholar and court minister Sugawara Michizane, 845–903. Over 10,000 branch shrines ritualize the deity who is mythically associated with oxen and cattle. According to tradition, Sugawara was born and came of age in the year of the ox and was saved from his enemy by a bull who miraculously appeared to kill his would-be assassins. Ironically, it was members of that same enemy clan, the Fujiwara, who had Sugawara enshrined some 50 years after his death. He received the name Tenjin, celestial kami, and has remained popular as the kami of learning. Large numbers of worshippers still go to his shrines on the 25th, both his birth and death day, of each month to reverence statues of reclining bulls, rubbing them and then rubbing the blessing onto themselves or their children. Birthdays are not as important on the whole as are death. Anniversaries and seasonal associations with the deified figures.
Are there any Shinto divination rituals?
Bokusan is the Japanese term for the complex process of divining auspicious times for agriculturalists. Divination encompasses a variety of specific devices. As in Chinese community traditions, people often draw lots, the Chinese shake bundles of numbered sticks and pull the one left protruding, and Shinto worshippers draw numbered bits of paper. Sometimes they will read the angle at which an arrow sticks in its target, or read the designs on a turtle shell, or hold a deer's shoulder blade in a flame and observe how it cracks. A similar ritual uses arrows for slightly different purposes. People purchase white arrows at shrine shops, especially around the New Year, and use them as amulets, protective devices, at home throughout the year. Divination is required for setting the dates for many major festivals. Ritual leaders invite certain divinatory kami to be in attendance. As the diviner kindles a sacred fire on which to heat a turtle shell. Specialists then read the relationship of the cracks to lines and characters pre-drawn on the shell. A ritual cousin of Chinese Feng Shui is called Kaso. It involves a set of geomantic calculations to establish optimal conditions for all sorts of human habitations. Another type of divination has worshippers write on small pieces of paper their various options as they prepare to make a major decision. In what may be a variation on a contemporary popular Chinese practice, people typically pull a stick from a bundle, read its number, and take a piece of pre-written advice from a correspondingly numbered drawer. Numerous Shinto shrines provide racks where people who find the advice unpalatable can tie their paper to be rid of the effects of the bad news.
How would you sum up the history of Shinto?
Beliefs now associated with the religious tradition called Shinto originated long before anyone ever referred to them as the way of the kami. Archaeological evidence points to various forms of nature worship, ancestor veneration, shamanistic rituals, and animistic beliefs in an agricultural society during the Neolithic, 7000 to 250 BCE, and Bronze Iron, 250 BCE 100 CE, ages. Primitive shrines dedicated to the community or clan. Deities called Ujigami appeared between 100 and 552 CE. Sometime in the later 6th century CE, after the arrival of Butsudo or the Way of the Buddha, Japanese distinguished indigenous beliefs from the imported tradition by inventing a name for it. During the Nara period, 710 to 94, the Nakatomi clan served as priests of a nascent imperial Shinto whose earliest major shrines were those of Ise and Izumo. By 737 Shinto shrines numbered over 3,000, 1 in 4 enjoying direct government support. The Fujiwara clan founded the important Kasuga shrine in Nara, the first capital. Kasuga was destined to play a critical role in the development of a hybrid of Buddhism and Shinto through its relationship with the nearby Buddhist temple of Todaiji. Throughout the Heian period 794-1185, with the capital newly established at Kyoto, Shinto's fortunes were intimately bound up with developments in Buddhism. Theologians on both sides devised theories designed to fit the two belief systems together, thereby inventing dual Shinto, a blend of both. The Kamakura period, 1185 to 1333, witnessed the rise of feudal lords, daimyo, and a samurai warrior caste under a shogun. Throne Field Marshal, of the Minamoto family, which had toppled the Fujiwara clan. The samurai code, Bushido, was a blend of Confucian aristocratic conservatism, Buddhist mental discipline, and Shinto patriotism. Under the Minamoto, the two chief kami were Sugawara Michizane, patron of literary and social concerns, and Hachiman, kami of war. Shinto grew as a popular religious tradition during the Muromachi/Ashikaga period. 1333 to 1568, the first name referring to the capital outside Kyoto and the second to the clan in power. With imperial patronage of pilgrimage to Ise Shrine. Pre- and early modern developments during the Momoyama/Azuchi, 1568 to 1615, and Edo/Tokugawa periods. 1615 to 1867, included Shinto's steady ascendancy over Buddhism and identification with the political power of dictatorial shoguns. 18th and 19th century Japanese isolationism went hand in hand with attempts to rid Shinto of foreign elements. That culminated in the Meiji reform, ushering in the modern period. 1868 to 1945, and restoring the emperor to divine status. World War II called Shinto's imperial theology into question and saw a return of popular sectarian movements.
Does Shinto tradition include pilgrimage?
Pilgrimages of various kinds have long been important to Japanese in connection with both Buddhism and Shinto. Sacred natural objects and shrines are of course the most common goals of Shinto pilgrims. But people do not always make neat distinctions between Buddhist and Shinto sacred sites. What is most significant is that the place has been hallowed by some event or person of great influence in Japanese history, or by natural qualities that betoken beauty and perfection. A distinctive aspect of Japanese pilgrimage is the formation of pilgrimage circuits, junpai, that encompass multiple stops at sacred groves, mountains, caves, waterfalls, shrines or temples, in all imaginable combinations. Most common are circuits of either 33 or 88 sites set up in relatively recent times by railway and other transportation companies. In medieval times there was even talk of 1,000 shrine pilgrimages. Senja Meiri, with multiple visits motivated by desire for greater spiritual merit. Some pilgrims undertake their journeys as acts of asceticism or spiritual discipline. But most seem to regard pilgrimage as an opportunity for reflection and spiritual renewal. A type of pilgrimage to Shinto's most sacred site, the Ise Shrine, has come to be known as the Blessing Visit, Okage-meiri. Another popular pilgrimage circuit leaves by rail from Osaka and takes in sites associated with the 7 gods of good luck, including both Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples. Over 400 traditional pilgrimage routes still attract Japanese Buddhist and Shinto devotees.
Does Shinto tradition include pilgrimage?
Pilgrimages of various kinds have long been important to Japanese in connection with both Buddhism and Shinto. Sacred natural objects and shrines are of course the most common goals of Shinto pilgrims. But people do not always make neat distinctions between Buddhist and Shinto sacred sites. What is most significant is that the place has been hallowed by some event or person of great influence in Japanese history, or by natural qualities that betoken beauty and perfection. A distinctive aspect of Japanese pilgrimage is the formation of pilgrimage circuits, junpai, that encompass multiple stops at sacred groves, mountains, caves, waterfalls, shrines or temples, in all imaginable combinations. Most common are circuits of either 33 or 88 sites set up in relatively recent times by railway and other transportation companies. In medieval times there was even talk of 1,000 shrine pilgrimages. Senja Meiri, with multiple visits motivated by desire for greater spiritual merit. Some pilgrims undertake their journeys as acts of asceticism or spiritual discipline. But most seem to regard pilgrimage as an opportunity for reflection and spiritual renewal. A type of pilgrimage to Shinto's most sacred site, the Ise Shrine, has come to be known as the Blessing Visit, Okage-meiri. Another popular pilgrimage circuit leaves by rail from Osaka and takes in sites associated with the 7 gods of good luck, including both Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples. Over 400 traditional pilgrimage routes still attract Japanese Buddhist and Shinto devotees.
How is music important in Shinto ritual?
Gagaku, refined music, is ancient courtly music originating in China as early as the Han Dynasty and cultivated by the Japanese in Heian imperial circles. Often associated with dance, the 14-member instrumental ensemble consists of percussion and reeds. But it also includes the stringed instrument similar to the Hawaiian guitar called the so. Cousin of the larger koto, identifiable by its frequent use of the technique of note bending. A pluck string called the biwa is also part of the ensemble. Woodwinds are the 3 reeds, sankan, short, piccolo-like 6 and 9-hole flutes. A primitive oboe-like woodwind that produces a sharp, edgy sound. And a cluster of 17 bamboo pipes called the show that is in fact a tiny pipe organ for the mouth. Slow stately rhythms beat out by the percussion underlie the haunting, almost plaintive sounds of the high-pitched reeds. Few sounds are a more apt musical communication of the sense of solemnity and perfect otherness of the deities the music addresses in Shinto shrines. Most non-Japanese who encounter music identified as Japanese are likely to associate that musical tradition with the sound of plucked strings, such as the koto and shamisen. In Shinto shrine ritual, however, stringed instruments do not play the major role they play in Chinese ritual. Percussion and woodwinds make up the bulk of the typical ceremonial ensemble. Percussion instruments include the massive taiko, a large barrel with two skin heads that sit sideways on an elevated stand just inside the outer ritual hall of larger shrines. A shrine ritualist, often one of the miko, deaconesses, announces the beginning of ceremonies by a pulse-pounding crescendo-decrescendo on the great drum. Various smaller drums keep time for dances.
How is music important in Shinto ritual?
Gagaku, refined music, is ancient courtly music originating in China as early as the Han Dynasty and cultivated by the Japanese in Heian imperial circles. Often associated with dance, the 14-member instrumental ensemble consists of percussion and reeds. But it also includes the stringed instrument similar to the Hawaiian guitar called the so. Cousin of the larger koto, identifiable by its frequent use of the technique of note bending. A plucked string called the baiwa is also part of the ensemble. Woodwinds are the three reeds, sankan, short, piccolo-like 6 and 9-hole flutes. A primitive oboe-like woodwind that produces a sharp, edgy sound. And a cluster of 17 bamboo pipes called the show that is in fact a tiny pipe organ for the mouth. Slow stately rhythms beat out by the percussion underlie the haunting, almost plaintive sounds of the high-pitched reeds. Few sounds are a more apt musical communication of the sense of solemnity and perfect otherness of the deities the music addresses in Shinto shrines. Most non-Japanese who encounter music identified as Japanese are likely to associate that musical tradition with the sound of plucked strings, such as the koto and shamisen. In Shinto shrine ritual, however, stringed instruments do not play the major role they play in Chinese ritual. Percussion and woodwinds make up the bulk of the typical ceremonial ensemble. Percussion instruments include the massive taiko, a large barrel with two skin heads that sit sideways on an elevated stand just inside the outer ritual hall of larger shrines. A shrine ritualist, often one of the miko, deaconesses, announces the beginning of ceremonies by a pulse-pounding crescendo-decrescendo on the great drum. Various smaller drums keep time for dances.